Hi everyone, this is my first Loom video and I want to thank Ann Gomez for having told me about this software. I've been looking for many months for something I could use that would allow me to show my screen while I'm talking, and I think you're going to find this video to be particularly helpful if you've considered or in fact have already purchased ProWritingAid, because what I want to do is walk you through how to use ProWritingAid. So here is the home page for the software, and I have an account. I have a premium account, as you can see, and I'm going to click on the Start Web Editor. So let's click on that. And now we're going to go into the list of documents that I have included in the software that I've worked on. And the most recent one is my recent blog post from last week. So I'm going to open this. Now, of course, I've already written and published this piece, so I'm not going to be able to change it now, but I just wanted to walk you through it so you can understand a little bit about how to use the specifics of ProWritingAid. So the very first thing you want to do, you can see there's a long list of choices at the top, and it looks a little bit intimidating, doesn't it? So what I suggest you do is go straight to the summary page. So you click on Summary, and this little spinning wheel will rotate for maybe as much as a minute. That the length of time it takes is going to depend on the length of piece you've given it. So as I remember, this piece is about 900 words. There we go. All right, so let me talk to you about what you should look at with this summary report that you'll receive from ProWritingAid. And remember, do the summary first. It's a really good overview of the quality of your writing, and it will give you a roadmap for the work you need to do in terms of the editing. First thing you want to look for is the overall score. Now, 67, if you're thinking in terms of schoolwork, might sound, kind of like is that a C minus? I don't know. I've been out of school for a long time, but I know 67 out of 100 doesn't sound particularly good. But actually, in terms of ProWritingAid, it's okay. Part of the reason it's okay is that I don't pay too much attention to their grammar and spelling scores. In terms of grammar, I don't fully understand how they operate, but I have a very good ear for grammar. And certainly in terms of anything I do like a book, then it will go to my copy editor and she'll be able to catch that stuff. So I'm not looking for ProWritingAid to correct my grammar. Spelling, the reason I have such a low spelling score here is not because I'm a bad speller, but because I use the Canadian Press Style Guide. And that's a kind of a unique amalgam of both British and American spelling, which probably looks woefully inconsistent to ProWritingAid, but is actually the style guide I follow. All right, and then my style score looks quite low here. I'm not sure why, but we'll find out more as we go more deeply into the report. So the next thing I want you to look at is that this report tells you the actual word count. So this is in fact just over 1,000 words. I mention this because you should know that none of these pieces of software that purport to be able to help you edit, they're not very effective if your length of text is less than 300 to 500 words. So don't bother putting it through any software if it's less than 300 to 500 words, because you just won't get a meaningful advice. The piece has 68 sentences, 21 paragraphs, and we don't need to learn about characters. All right, scroll down to readability measures. This is the first thing I will look at and view as really, really important. So my Flesch Reading Ease score is 72. That is really good. Anything above a 60 is considered good. So I'm substantially above a 60. I am happy with that. The next thing I want to look at are the grade level measures. Now, if you've been a member of this group for a long time, you'll understand that I like to aim for a grade level measure of somewhere between 7 and 9 for my writing. That might sound shockingly low to some of you, but it doesn't reflect the intelligence of the reader. What it does is it reflects the ease of reading that the reader is going to experience. And basically, any reader needs a job that's relatively easy. You may think that if you're a university or an academic, that you want to be writing at a grade 14 or 18 level. The higher, the better. It shows how smart you are. No, it doesn't. It shows how difficult to read your work is. So I wouldn't say that academics should aim at a grade 7 to 9 level, but they shouldn't be much higher than a grade 10 or 11 level. If you're higher than grade 10 or 11, your work is just too hard to read. I've worked with engineers who will achieve a reading level of something like a grade 23. It's abysmal. Their writing is terrible, really, really hard to read. So if you're an academic, you probably want to be in the grade 10 and 11 range. If you're not, if you're a blogger, you definitely want to be in the grade 7 to 9 range. And as you can see, this piece has achieved that. These indices use slightly different methods, so the grades are going to be slightly different as well. This goes from a low of grade 6.8 to a high of grade 7 to 8. I am fine with that. Those are really good scores, so we don't need to worry about grade level measures anymore. Now, the next little bar graph, it's quite pretty, don't you think? Tells you your readability by paragraph. And I want to tell you why I essentially ignore this measure. It's because when you have a very easy to read sentence, that's a great thing. But it's also perfectly okay, even necessary, to have some long sentences that might be a bit more challenging to read. I think it's okay to have sentences in the 40 to 50 word length, but what you need to do is you need to balance those long sentences with some super short ones, so 1 to 5 words each. And as long as you're able to do that, then your reading, the reading is going to be fine for your readers. So that's why one of the things I want to look at next, I'm just going to ignore overused words for now. I want to look at sentence structure. And here it will tell you what your average sentence length is. And you can see that I scored an average sentence length of 14.7. So that is great. I always tell readers they should emulate or work towards a score of somewhere between 14 and 18. Academics could go a little bit higher, but not a lot higher, maybe up to 18 to 20 as a max. But if you're getting much beyond that, your writing is going to be really, really hard to read, and you want to reduce some of those sentences, the length of some of those sentences. So there are some other apps out there in the world of online editing. The Hemingway app is one of them, and I used to use the Hemingway app, and I used to really like it. But then I discovered over time that the Hemingway app regards every long sentence as a problem, and that is not true. Every long sentence is not a problem. What's a problem is if on average your sentences are too long. So look at the sentence length average. And if you're in the 14 to 18 word range, 14 to 20 word range, if you're an academic, then you are fine. You don't have to worry about your sentence length. Here's another measure that you might want to look at. This is your sentence length variety. So it's really important to have a good variety of sentence lengths. If all your sentences were precisely 14 words, your writing would be very boring and choppy and hard to read as a result of that repetition. So the software says they want to target greater than 3 as a sentence length average, and I'm at 4.8. So I am happy with that. It has marked that I have 2 long sentences, but again, because my sentence length is okay and because my sentence length variety is okay, I'm not going to worry about those 2 long sentences. Okay, now let's talk about passive construction. So passive sentences are where you hide the actor of the sentence. So mistakes were made is a classic passive sentence. Why? Because it doesn't tell you who was making those mistakes. Similarly, if you say mistakes were made by the president, that's also a passive sentence because you hide the actor of the sentence until after the verb. And you don't want to do that as a writer because it makes the reading harder for your readers. Part of the reason it makes it harder is because readers find writing easy to read when they can visualize what they are reading. And if you hide or delay revealing who the actor of the sentence is, it's going to interfere with the reader's ability to visualize your sentences. So by and large, you want to have active sentences. Now, there can be some cases where the occasional use of passive is okay. And here, I'm quite surprised that ProWritingAid says, they would allow 25 passive sentences or 25 uses of passive in a piece that's relatively short, like this 1,000-word one. That kind of boggles my mind. I would be comfortable having one, and we'll go and take a look at it later and see what it is. So you want a relatively small number of passive sentences. Hidden verbs, I think a hidden verb is a verb that has been, that's a noun that's been turned into a verb. So for instance, communication. So that is a word based on the verb communicate, turns it into a noun by adding the shun at the end of it. And what that does, if you're preparing a sentence, is it forces you to use another verb in the sentence. And so those hidden verbs can make your writing wordier than it needs to be. So we'll go take a look for that when we get into a deeper part of ProWritingAid. All right, let's just go along here. I'm going to ignore grammar and spelling because those aren't issues for me. Now I want to talk about sticky sentences. Many people who use ProWritingAid end up emailing me about sticky sentences, and I want to say you have my permission to ignore the section on sticky sentences. I have wrestled with this one for months. Sticky sentences were identified by an academic, I believe, an academic lawyer in the 1950s or early 60s. And he found, of course, that many lawyers write in ways that are difficult to understand and unnecessarily wordy. And so he proposed the concept of glue words. And these are 200 words commonly used in the English language. You need to know that you cannot write without these glue words. The word the is a glue word. You could not write a piece of text without the word the. It just wouldn't work. So this measure does not say you can't use these words, but it does say you can't use too many in a sentence. Now, what I have found going through text and looking at the sticky sentences is I found that by and large, the sentences are not hard to understand, at least not in my writing and in the writing of other writers I've worked with. So I've just come to the point where I basically ignore what ProWritingAid has to say about sticky sentences. I don't find it useful. Okay, now let's have a talk about transitions. So transitions are really, really important to easy to understand writing. And transitions, you probably use them all the time. Here's some examples that I used: and, for, or, as, also. They're these kind of flow words that take you from one sentence to the next, or from the part of one sentence to another part. They make reading easier and more pleasant. So I like to use a lot of transitions when I'm writing. And as you can see, ProWritingAid suggests greater than 25%, and I've hit 169%. So woohoo, that's great. You too should also aspire to go well beyond what ProWritingAid recommends there. If you are under ProWritingAid's recommendation of 25%, you have a problem and you need to go back and add some more transitions into your writing. And I have done a blog post on transitions, so I will try to find that and I will post the link to it when I post this video. All right, this is another interesting section, repeated phrases. So it looks for repeated phrases of certain lengths of phrases. So here's a 5-word phrase that I've used twice. There are different types of, and I've used these 2 4-word phrases: be sure to mute, improve the quality of, also twice. And there's some 3-word phrases I've used twice, some 2-word ones. Now, 1-word ones, that's not a phrase, that's a word. So I would just totally ignore that. I'd be more concerned about the 4-word phrases and the 5-word phrases. I can no longer recall why I used those repetitively. There may be a very good reason for using them repetitively. So I'm just going to make a note of them. And then when we go deeper into ProWritingAid, we can check on that. So I'm going to make a note of there are different types of. Okay, cliches and redundancies. All right, so the cliches, I abhor cliches, so I always read this part of the report with great concern. Baking, I do not think of baking as a cliche. Time are you? That seems like a oddly clunky phrase, but I'm not sure I would call that a cliche. Halcyon days, that's definitely a cliche, but I used that, I remember now, with tongue in cheek. So I think that's probably okay, but we'll go and have a look at it later. Chit chat. I don't see chit-chat as a cliche. So the thing about ProWritingAid is that it's not a real live person. It's an algorithm. So you are free and welcome to disagree with it. It's just bringing these issues to your attention, and you need to think about them. And then once you've thought about them, you can say, no, I'm going to ignore what ProWritingAid had to say there. That's perfectly okay. All right. Excuse me. Let's just scroll past the consistency section here. Other items. Diction. They don't like words like some, like, there are, kind of, established. I'm not going to worry about those. I'm a bit more concerned about the words they describe as vague and abstract. About can sometimes be used in a vague way, like, similarly, also. Not sure about also. Background, I don't find that vague or abstract. Really, yes, that could be abstract. So we'll take a look at those issues later. All right, so that's the overall report. It gives you a good sense of how your piece of writing has done. And I would say my overall reaction to reading this report is, this is pretty good. I am basically happy with this piece, but I want to take a closer look at some of the issues that it raised. Okay, so I've closed off the summary report, and now you can see there are a bunch of issues we can go to at the top of the page here. So let's take a look at style. So let's look for that passive verb. So you can see there's a red button here and it says one passive verb found. So I'm going to click on the little arrow there, and there's another arrow here. And the software has plopped me right down to where the use of the passive is. So here's the sentence. I say, or turn off your video if you really don't want to be seen. So here I'm talking about Zoom, and you know, it might be an improvement to say if you really don't want other viewers to see you. Yes, I think that is an improvement, and I've gotten rid of that one passive. So ta-da, wish I'd done that before the piece was published. All right, one hidden verb found. So let's have a look at that. All right, this informal chit-chat is connecting and helps establish a better rapport, which in turn will make the meeting more successful. I'm not quite sure how I would change that. I don't think it's possible to express this thought in a better way. Just let me give this some more thought. Informal and help us, which in turn. You know, this won't solve that particular problem, but I think the sentence would be better if I changed that word to your. Oh, and the software seems to think that solved the problem. Let's run this through again. I don't know if that really has solved the problem, so I'm just going to, oh, sorry. I am afraid I don't know how to run this through again except by checking out and rechecking in, and that's going to take more time, so we won't do that. All right, let's look at the style improvements they suggest. This is where I didn't like the word different types. So they're suggesting words like unique, uncommon, distinct, unfamiliar. Well, unfamiliar is not going to work. Unique doesn't really work for me. Uncommon is wrong in the context of this sentence. Distinct, I'm not sure distinct is a big improvement on different, so I'm just going to put that little eyeball mark there, which indicates that I've considered that question and I've decided to ignore it. Okay, great success. So here I say, Mark Twain, Kurt Vonnegut, and Anais Nin are three high-profile extroverts who did it, which means wrote, to great success. Oh, it doesn't like the word great, so it wants me to change it to substantial, significant, magnificent, grand, splendid, monumental, glorious, brilliant, marvelous, outstanding. I don't like any of those words. I'm just going to ignore that one too. Whoops. Okay, a huge problem. Okay, they don't like the word huge. They're suggesting enormous, vast, immense, colossal, gigantic, monumental, tremendous. I don't like any of those. I have a feeling if I were to change that to big, I like short words. You know what? I'm just going to ignore that. So I hope I'm giving you the understanding that what you can do is you can say no to ProWritingAid. That's not going to be a problem. Okay. So here I'm talking about Zoom, and I say you can even set a different background in Zoom using a stock photo if you like. So they don't like the word different. They want to use the word unique. That's not an improvement or even accurate to me. So I'm going to ignore that one. And here they want me to change run directly. So let me just, sorry, I don't like the way where that box pops up. Oh, geesh. I don't know why that is. Oh man, sorry, I've done something odd there. Okay, I'm just going to find this. Here. Okay, I'm also buying a device that will allow me to rush to my professional microphone oh my gosh, there's a grammar error here. I am also buying a device that will allow me to rush to my professional microphone. I'm going to change this to only to join my professional microphone with my computer to improve the quality of my sound. Okay, that allowed me to catch what was an outright error in this piece, and I'm going to have to go look at my blog now and maybe fix that one. Yikes, glad I discovered this. All right, so that's the writing style check. I could go into more of these things, but I guess you now should get the sense of how it works. Okay, so let's go to the overused words section here. So it doesn't like the way I've used the words feel, feels, feeling, felt. So let's see. My goodness, I've only used 3. You know, I'm just going to ignore that. So that seems to be the only overused words. I'm not sure what combo does. Let's have a look. Sorry, running these reports does take some time. Okay, this is where it gets into diction, vague and abstract words, sticky sentences. Let's go to sticky sentences so you can see. Okay, so this is a sticky sentence. I'm just going to read the paragraph to you. I've also been in several largish meetings with an employer of mine, and I find the number of people involved, usually 12, to be distracting and overwhelming. An hour of that kind of meeting, taking in all sorts of information, feels like way too much. So yes, many of those words are sticky, but I do not find that sentence hard to understand. And it's relatively short as well. So that's an example of why I think sticky sentences just aren't worth following up. Here is some advice about how to cope when your life is being governed by screens. Sticky sentence, apparently, but that's not hard to understand. So bottom line is just ignore the sticky sentences. Now it says no passive verbs found. That's odd because I thought in the intro summary report it said there was one, but that's good. No hidden verbs found. 5 style improvements found. So let's find out what they are. Oh, it doesn't like different types, great success, huge problem, different background. So we went through those before. So anyways, those are all things you can look for under the combo check. I assume it's checking more than one of these categories up above. Repeats. This is interesting. This is going to be where we'll get to those repeated phrases. Sorry, the little spinning wheel. There we go. Okay, 5-word phrase. So let's see where that is. Just as there are different types of food, from kale to Cheetos, there are different types of screen time. Okay, so this is a perfect example. I have used that repetition, those 5 words, deliberately to help pull the reader through the sentence. So, in fact, repeating certain words or phrases, as long as you're doing it deliberately and mindfully, can act like a major transition for your readers. So that is not something I would certainly want to change. So you can go through all the repeats and make sure you feel comfortable with all of them. Again, just ignore the frequent one-word phrases. That's not going to be a problem at all. All right. As you can see across the top, there are a whole bunch of things you can go and look at. I almost never look at all of them. I will most often look at the summary and the style and the overused, but I think I might start looking at the combo. Now, oh, and there's a transition thing here. So I don't have a problem with transitions, so I'm not going to look at that. Recently, I discovered a structural. Now this is one I think I'm going to start looking at a bit more frequently. The structural one is quite interesting. What this does is it explores the way in which you begin your sentences. So in this particular piece I've written, it tells me that 47 of my sentences start with a subject. So that is the dog sat on the porch. The dog is the subject, and it's a very standard, easy to understand sentence, and for most writing, or for most published writing, 61% of sentences begin with a subject. Now I have 13% of my sentences beginning with an adverb, which is slightly higher than other published writing. I have 0% of my sentences starting with a gerund. That's an ing word. So I might want to consider adding some. I think that's a really good idea. 0% of my sentences are starting with an infinitive. Also a good way to add some variety to your writing. 11% of my sentences are starting with a subordinate conjunction compared to 17% in published writing. So I could up that total a little bit. 10% of my sentences are starting with a coordinating conjunction. So that would be like and only 5% in published writing. But I love starting sentences with coordinating conjunctions. I think it enhances readability. So I'm not going to reduce my total there. I haven't started any with a past participle, so that's something I could consider doing. 16% of my sentences start with a verb followed by a subject compared to 3% in published writing. So I might want to take a closer look at that and see if I'm really overusing that. And then 1% of my sentences start with an introductory word compared to 3% in published writing. So I'm not quite sure what they mean by introductory word, but I'm going to do a little bit of research on that. Bottom line of this report, which is the sentence structure check right here in the middle, is that it allows you to see if you've used enough variety in the way you begin sentences. And that might be a really good thing for you to look into if you're really wanting to fine-tune your writing and take it to a slightly more sophisticated level. Okay, so that's it in terms of my tutorial for how to use ProWritingAid. If you don't own ProWritingAid, a couple of points I can give you. You can use it for free on pieces of text that are up to 500 words. So I think you should do that if you have something that falls within that limit. I believe there may also be a 7-day or 14-day free trial period. So if you're thinking about getting it, be sure to use the free trial period first. The other thing I would say about ProWritingAid is that they do have sales a couple of times a year. So if you're thinking about getting it, start to monitor the site and watch it until it goes on sale, because you could save a good chunk of money there. They will often put it at 25% off, and it costs about $170 a year. I bought a lifetime membership a couple of years ago. I no longer remember how much I paid for that, but it has been well worth the investment because I use it all the time. Okay, thank you so much. If anyone has any questions about ProWritingAid, be sure to post it in the GEL section or send me an email, and I'd be happy to answer them. Thanks so much for participating in today's call.